Hi, this is Mark Vino with Smart Tech Research. I'm here with Scott Newman, Corporate Vice President of Marketing at Calix. Um, this is my fourth or fifth
Gotta
ConneXions
be, yeah.
event. I may not be a veteran, but I'm close.
You're a veteran.
I'm close. Scott, explain what ConneXions is all about. It's I've seen some of the messaging that will be presented quite shortly in the keynotes. But from your perspective, what is ConneXions and its value proposition to the very large group of BSPs, broadband service providers, for those of you who don't know what that stands for. Let's just talk a little bit about the history of the event.
Sure.
And what you hope to accomplish at a thematic level.
Yeah, so under the formal name of ConneXions, this is our 18th. So we've been doing this for quite some time.
Wow.
Now it keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we actually sold out this year almost 6 weeks ahead of schedule.
Really?
Which is the earliest we've ever sold out. So that means it's resonating. Core messages, we've renamed this
In
conference.
Las Vegas, you're hotter than the Eagles.
Yeah.
Here. That's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. Which a couple customers went to last night. I heard it was a good
Yes,
show.
well, yeah.
But at the core, we renamed the ConneXions as really an innovation and customer success conference. It's not a product announcement conference. It's not a tech conference. This is really about how together with our customers, and you'll see that on the main stage, this idea of rising together. How do we do that together to innovate for their subscribers? And then how do we ensure that they're going to be successful, again, together to deliver that to the communities that they serve?
Now, one theme that I know you're going to talk about, and it's a very interesting choice of words, is that we're kind of entering now the experience era of broadband. And now you could argue that, with or without strong relationships,
Sure.
it'll be successful in some degree. But the point Calix is making is that to really have an optimized internet experience, this immersive experience coming up at a lot of different angles,
Sure.
the partnership piece has to be there, a trusted partnership.
Yeah.
And that's really important. It's not just casual. I just say it casually because when you're at this event and you sit down with many of the customers that are here, you hear that kind of recurring theme over and over again. So
Yeah.
talk about that and the integration of those topics.
Sure. So think of it as there's a fundamental choice as you start, addressing your market. Now, both will coexist for many years. You can be a speed provider, but there's some challenges if that's your core strategy. One, you better be pretty big, and you better have amazing operational efficiencies because you're going to be dealing with razor thin margins.
Yes.
So that's the only way to survive. There will be players 10 years from now that their whole play is fast and cheap. But the vast majority of customers at this conference don't have that scale and that kind of efficiency. So what are they going to do?
Right.
We are encouraging them to start to focus on, no, you want to think of yourselves as an experience provider. And there are a number of best practices that we will go through on the stage tomorrow that will guide them through, well, how do I get started? And what's the next step that I should do? And well, what would be the first experience I'm going to roll out? It doesn't appeal to my wallet, but it appeals to my emotions and what I really see as tangible value for what I'm paying for when I see my bill come in every month.
Well, it's fascinating because it's not a new theme that, man can't live by broadband speed alone.
Right, yes.
That type of thing. And it's very, very true. Now, there are some users that are out there, I probably fall in this category to a degree that, speed is a big deal. I do a lot of work at home, a lot of podcasts, a lot of video editing, a lot of stuff that requires very, very fast connections.
Right.
But most homeowners, most people who rent an apartment, they don't want to be the CTO of their family. And I say that very deliberately.
Oh, yeah.
No,
you and I are tech enough that we are the CTOs.
And you effectively become that.
Yeah.
So I guess the question really is that, and you're also going to show some data, which I think is fascinating, how your projection, you're not ignoring the fact that people are embracing faster and faster speeds.
Sure.
And that's a function of the fact that better broadband speeds are becoming much
Enable
more.
better technology.
That's absolutely right. And I'll give you a perfect example. I just moved out here to Las Vegas about 5 months ago, and my service provider out here had fiber. I have never had a fiber connection living in good old San Jose, and it's truly transformative when you have that up and down speed. It is mind blowing. Now, having said that, once you get all that raw material from a speed standpoint, what can you do with it?
Exactly.
How do you protect your home?
What's next?
Do you have kids? Do you have to manage in terms of controlling in terms of what kind of content they see and what websites they get access to?
Yeah.
You guys have got a great relationship with Bart. So let's talk a little bit more about that, because I think that the need to do this in a very trusted manner is becoming much more important.
Sure. So, I mean, in the spirit of we are in Vegas, so I will use the term table stakes, right? This is your ante up, right? You're going to drop your ante into your blackjack table. And it's like, all right, well, yeah, you've got to at least have decent speed to a point, right? Once you get past a certain bridge, and it'll depend on the subscriber. Maybe that's 200 megs, maybe that's 500. Maybe you really have an Uber user with lots of cameras and gaming and AR and VR. What? Great, they got a gig. But if I took you and gave you a gig, and then tomorrow I turned up 2 gig, and then the next day I turned up 5 gig, chances are you wouldn't even know unless I actually said, oh, by the way, you're now on a 5 gig line. You wouldn't even notice it.
Correct.
So once you get past that threshold of, okay, I'm not having any latency issues, I'm not getting the buffering or jittering. Okay, so now what? Well, if that's all I'm getting, and I'm now susceptible from a security perspective and so forth, I'm thinking, well, all right, am I getting any security from my provider? Yes or no? That's a potential to switch. Are you giving me a good deal? And the only thing I'm now looking at is, well, what are you charging me? Well, now you're in a price war.
Yes.
So we're going to help our customers go, well, let's talk about that security. What kind of security do you need? And that could be anything from network security, device security in the home. That could be home security, physical with connected cameras. That could be keeping your kids safe from cyberbullies and online threats with Bark. So it can take all kind of shapes and sizes. And you can create different packages. You can create one of the popular ones that we talk with our customers about is the Guardian plan. So you can see with the data and based on our Engagement Cloud and Claritas data, well, if your subscribers have families, well, that would be a great example to say, well, let's not offer you just here's your 500 meg plan. Let's offer you a Guardian plan. Why? Because I'm appealing to you as a parent, not as someone who's just trying to pay the cheapest they can have in any given month. And that's just one example. Then you can think about gamers. You can think about work from homers. You could think about grandparents. Funny little story about grandparents. Most you would think, I just want enough to do email, maybe browse a little bit, just a little old grandma, a little old grandpa. Well, guess what they love more than anything in the world, assuming they have them? Their grandkids. They would like their grandkids to come visit. Well, guess what their grandkids like to do? They like to game. Well, what's really interesting is when you start approaching those communities, they want a gamer package. You're thinking, grandma's on Xbox? No.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, exactly. So those are examples of the kinds of experiences that go, you know what? My broadband provider gets me. They understand how I use broadband, not just how much I want to pay for a drink of broadband.
Right. Now, taking this back to the BSP level,
Right.
and sometimes it's hard to explain to people, but especially with the BSPs that you focus, you get your bread and butter in terms of they're sometimes relative, not obscure, that would be a bad term to use, but they're sometimes in areas that there's not a lot of choices,
right?
But I have noticed that especially with the smaller providers, the relationship piece is so important because they're not looking for a transactional relationship.
No.
Someone could sign up for, I have a real high-speed plan, it's really cheap, and the customer support is awful. They don't offer some of the capabilities that Calix offers. But talk about why that relationship piece is so important.
Oh, the local trust. I mean, so if you're going to get into the space of security, which we are encouraging every single customer, this is your base. It shouldn't even be an option. They shouldn't be able to get broadband from you unless it's secure. Why? Because it's the right thing to do.
Right.
There's going to be a story tomorrow on Jade in Colorado. They have their tech crew. They call them the Wi-Fi wizards. Perfect example or a story about trust. So they're helping to get everything all set up. They do white glove treatment to get all of their connected cameras around the home, and they're selling a ton of them. But they love their Wi-Fi wizard so much. If they have an issue and then they get it fixed, and they're like, okay, great, it's all set. We're going to stream Netflix. Oh, by the way, I'm kind of new in town. Do you know a good pizza restaurant? They're literally asking the Wi-Fi wizards at Jade for other recommendations about their lifestyle. Why? Because they trust the brand so much.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is when you know you've hit it's a level of relationship where it's not a vendor, exchange, but you're actually partnering with your broadband provider.
Well, and I can tell you, I won't name the name of my cable provider back in San Jose, but it was a very, I was there with them 18 years. Now that was the only choice I had,
right?
Which is really weird since I was only about 5 miles away from Apple and
right
in the heart of Silicon Valley. But I don't think I ever had a technician came over, even when I had some problems, and I didn't get the feeling that they really understood
Right.
some of the issues that I had. And the thing that's really interesting, and this is what I want to kind of segue to, is I noticed that the theme that you have, and I see it on all the marquee and the signage here, is Rise Together.
Yeah.
And I have to say, because I'm a Yankee fan,
Okay.
you didn't rip that off from Aaron Judge.
I was not. No,
no,
all rise for
all
Aaron
rise,
Judge.
man.
Yes, I know.
So just funny because the Yankees are going to win the World Series.
As a Yankee fan, I would agree with
Are
you.
you a Yankee
I
fan?
am. I grew up in New York.
Oh, good. I'm glad. We can still stay friends.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
But talk about how that important it is, the whole, what, because I really think it is a very powerful message.
The point is the concept of together is more than just Calix and the broadband provider. We have dozens of partners here that have amazing solutions and services that are part of this together. And you're going to hear on stage tomorrow, broadband providers actually teaming with each other to actually create an alliance for Smart Town, which will be one of the things that we'll talk about. So this together is a really big thought. And the idea is that there are best practices coming from everywhere. Michael's going to touch on, we have 12 different advisory councils that we maintain. It is all about listening. And he will talk about, this is co-innovation. We never for 1 minute assume that the best and the brightest actually all work for Calix, right? They can be anywhere. And so I would say close to half of some of the ideas on where we tweak or adjust or what our next offering could be is actually customer source going, I've got an idea. Calix, what do you think about this? And we'll start to kick it around. We'll bounce it around a couple other customers. And if we think, hey, we're onto something here. I mean, Smart Biz, that was customer sourced. Outdoor Wi-Fi, customer sourced. Smart Town Alliance, customer sourced. These were all ideas that were in conversation with our executives going, this would be a next great thing for you to build for us because it's going to help me solve my next opportunity in my market. So together is a really big thought.
No, it's a very, very powerful theme. In the few minutes we have left here, let's talk a little bit about MDU, Smart Biz, Smart Towns. I mean, these are all concepts that are still relatively new.
Yeah.
But the goal is to expand that immersive broadband experience beyond just your house or your apartment.
Exactly.
So, because you guys are doing a lot of work in that.
We
area.
are.
So, talk a little bit about that for a
So
second.
I'll qualify your statement a little bit you just said. So the challenge to solve is not new. What we're going to be announcing is going to be new. So, many of our customers, they were born and bred. I mean, Alla will talk tomorrow, and Brad Mullane, for 20 years, they started with small businesses. Problem was back then, the only thing available to small businesses was to take a residential gateway, throw it into a small business, charge them twice as much because they're a small business, right? And feel a little bit guilty about it.
Right.
Well, now there's a purpose-built solution for small businesses to thrive, right? It's exactly what they need. They've got the dedicated networks that are secure for the point of service display, for their staff, for the management, as well for guests that come in and have free Wi-Fi, the ability to push notifications to them when they're on the Wi-Fi about specials, whatever they want to do, and collect those insights so they can do it better the next time. Smart MDU. People have been getting Wi-Fi in, apartment buildings and condos for years, but it hasn't been optimized. We've now figured out with the ability to be flexible on, well, how big is the unit? Oh, this is the right system to put in place. How strong do you need it to be? Got it. Is it an outdoor common area? Oh, use this one. Do you need IoT devices to connect to this one? Oh, by the way, is it all secured and manageable by the property owner? Yes. So the issue or the opportunity isn't new, but how we're solving it is new. And same thing with Smart Town. I mean, we all try to get from A to B to C. I mean, we don't all, eventually we do leave our house and we walk outside and we start wandering around. The old model was, well, gee, I hope I've got cell coverage. Well, the vast majority of America has really crappy cell coverage. And that's where our customers, that's their bread and butter. So if we could tap that, in a sense, treat each one of the gateways, the systems that we're putting in place, as a sense as a small cell unit and just turn it on. It's really no different than a cell tower, but the difference is it's fiber-fed broadband. And so now you can have an amazing experience wandering through the town, out to the park, secure, content controls, all put on it. You're connecting the football field, you're connecting the baseball diamond, you're connecting the auditorium.
You think of the opportunities from an e-commerce standpoint with businesses that can participate in that in a very responsible way. It opens up a whole plethora of different opportunities.
The whole concept of, the overarching theme is smart life.
Yes.
That is the portfolio. And we want every single community to being able to have a smart life.
Right.
When you do that, you will start to see amazing results. And Matt Collins will touch on a study that was announced 2 weeks ago that we co-sponsored with the Fiber Broadband Association, NTCA, and Calix with the Center on Rural Innovation, Corey. Groundbreaking study. What we wanted to look at was, let's look at all the counties all across the country that are non-metropolitan, right? So there's a specific classification. Go, this is a rural county. Then we looked at all of them, which ones have low broadband penetration, which ones have high, and then which ones have more advanced services like smart town, smart business, so forth. Then we looked at counties that were pretty much twins, but one was in one bucket, one was in the other. So population size about the same, GDP was about the same. So they were ruled out as many variables as we could. So the only two things were really no broadband, amazing broadband. Then we looked at the results. Small business growth, through the roof. Local per capita income growing. Entrepreneurship and self-employment growing. All of these are happening. Why? Because they are connecting these communities.
Right.
And so we're announcing that study was announced 2 weeks ago, and we're going to be featuring it on our main stage to dive into. This is proof positive of, in a sense, what the BEAD program is encouraging all of us to do is to connect those communities. When you get small businesses thrive, guess what happens? People get employed. People start raising their local GDP. They start spending more, higher tax revenue for the town to reinvest in the town. And then the knock-on effects of a community that's actually thriving and growing versus population drains, schools closing, people moving to the big cities. This is reversing that trend. It's really exciting stuff.
Very exciting stuff.
Yeah.
Any closing thoughts before we end the podcast?
I can't wait for tomorrow. It's going to be, every time we finish a ConneXions, like we spoke last year, we always think better, never best. What are we going to be doing? And every year we figure out new ways to hopefully surprise and delight the attendees. So it all gets kicked off tonight with the welcome reception at XS, and then tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
With Jerry D?
With Jerry D tomorrow night featured. And he will, as usual, he will make an appearance tomorrow. You don't know when, but he will.
I'm sure he will. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Scott. We appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
Thanks again.
Thank you, Mark.
Hi, this is Mark Vino with Smart Tech Research. I'm here at the second day of Calix's ConneXions 2024, a great partner event that explores the great relationships they have with their broadband service providers, some of the things they're doing to strengthen their footprint and their traction with their broadband subscribers. But I've got a great treat here for people watching today's podcast, and that is a discussion with Matt Dunn, who is the founder and executive director of Corey, the Center of Rural Innovation, and as well as Amanda Weinstein, who is got much better title, the director of Research, Knowledge, and Evaluation. And we're going to drill down a bit on this great research report the company just published about 15 days ago, 2 weeks ago, roughly. So before we jump into that, Matt, let's talk about Corey and what you guys do.
Sure. So the Center on Rural Innovation is a social enterprise that's focused on helping build tech economies in rural places. The great divide economically that happened between urban and rural places in 2008 can really be traced back to the winners and losers of the tech economy and automation. And what we do is work with those communities on the front end, advising on their broadband strategy, then helping them with places and spaces that can create a thriving tech ecosystem like co-work spaces, tech accelerators, incubators, tech talent development programs. Then on the far end, we have a seed fund where we invest in those early stage tech companies that are coming out of rural places. But really important to all of that is to understand the context of what's happening in rural communities. And that's why we stood up the research division that Amanda is the head of to make sure that we understand what's happening in the economics of rural places. We can move away from some of the tropes about what people think is possible in rural to what really is possible, and to have a better understanding of those levers that can allow for rural economies to thrive.
No, Amanda, this report, which is a fascinating report, really kind of dives into the whole role of broadband in rural areas, and we're going to we'll probably define what the word rural means, but it really provides some, and sometimes counterintuitive things that the average person might not consider in terms of what's happening in rural areas when you kind of juxtapose the impact of broadband, especially as it becomes more ubiquitous and speeds get a bit faster. So let's talk about maybe maybe a couple of aha things that came out of that report that kind of surprised you. Maybe
Yeah.
it didn't surprise you because you're smarter than me.
Yeah. So, I mean, what Matt said, when we look at the data, we see a growing divide between rural and non rural places. We see population declining. We see them losing jobs. We see businesses closing, right? That's pretty much the status quo right now in rural America. What we found in this report is when you have really high broadband utilization, what this can actually do is for communities, it's not just that we're not seeing businesses close. We're not seeing businesses close, we're seeing new ones open. We're seeing new startups and new businesses happen in rural America when they have access to things like broadband and really great broadband access. So much so that what we found for the communities with high broadband utilization, their business growth rate was 213% higher than businesses without, or than communities without. And here we looked at similar communities. So for rural places, we would expect them to be losing businesses. And instead, the places that had high broadband utilizations were actually growing businesses. That is a big change for those communities.
Well, and the thing that I was taught in college, maybe in high school, was that back in the late 18th century, the late 19th century, early 20th century, you saw this tremendous shift in populations from the rural areas. Because back then the economy was mostly an agrarian economy, and then of course the Industrial Revolution came along, the birth of factories, were near big cities, or the big cities became big cities because they did have this influx of workers. But now that would seem to suggest that there's kind of a reverse trend
Yeah.
going on. So, Matt, what do you think about this?
Well, our fundamental belief is that in the age of the internet and high quality broadband, there should be no limit to where good quality jobs and new scalable enterprises can take place. And we're seeing it happen. And this has particularly been of interest since COVID. Since I think COVID really changed the way that people thought about the where you could actually have a good job, where you could find great talent, and where you could make a great investment. And so that change, we sort of knew intuitively that moving forward with the rural electrification of our time, which is bringing broadband to rural places, that would be possible. But with the support of Calix and the Fiber Broadband Association and NTCA, we were able to actually dig deep into that data, and it turns out that it is statistically significant that if you have high quality broadband and particular kinds of efforts that go to leverage that broadband, you can have a thriving rural economy.
Now, the interesting thing is, Amanda, is that when you kind of consider what happened during COVID, where work at home became a thing, companies had to overnight kind of change their engagement with employees. Hey, you could work from home. And then it became a case of, hey, if I'm living in San Jose, let me move 100 miles away where it's a lot less expensive to live. And many companies were amenable to that. Now, of course, you're backing off of that because they've got very expensive real estate. This would seem to suggest that whole perfect storm thing coming together where, for those companies that still will entertain remote workers, and there's still many companies that are willing to do that, that kind of is the data that you're suggesting is kind of a tailwind. Hey, I can move to a much more affordable area, and by the way, thrive, whether I want to start up a new business. And I think we will all agree that even in the most affordable areas, starting up a new business is sometimes a crapshoot. You don't know whether that's going to work or not. And it's vital to have a very low cost infrastructure, whether it's housing, whether it's going to build an office, whatever the story is, but especially for employees. So how do you kind of pull that data together in this report with that kind of trend, that macro trend that could be happening?
Yeah, so what we saw are for communities with the lowest broadband utilization, they did see that population decline. They did see movement away from those rural places to other areas. But for places with high broadband utilization, we just see that it gives people access to economic opportunity where they're living. They can start a business, they can build wealth in the community that they're in. They are helping to grow their economy. We saw higher GDP, 44% higher in these high broadband utilization places. We saw more self-employment. We saw 10% higher self-employment rates in these communities. So it's really opening up access, whether it's remote work, self-employment, opening your own business. It's opening up access to a variety of options in rural places and really showing what's possible in rural communities. And when you look, there's previous studies on rural learners that say they actually have more interest in entrepreneurship. It's a risky business, as you mentioned. They are more interested in taking that risk than urban adults are.
Now, the interesting thing, Matt, and this gets a little into the technical realm of this, is that broadband speeds have been getting faster. In the marketplace, 50,000 feet, you've got many, many companies out there that they focus on speed. And as was mentioned in the keynote this morning with Michael and with Matt, the discussion was about you can't focus, if your only value proposition is speed, that's not likely to be a winning relationship long term. And the BSPs that Calix operates in very often are very small. They are operating in relatively small markets from a population size, and they do have to have a really strong engagement relationship with their subscribers, and they have to offer these kind of value-added services. And Calix has got this whole plethora of capabilities, whether it's focused on MDUs, smart business, smart towns. So when you look at a Calix and you try to stitch together the data that's coming out of the report, how do you kind of stitch that together?
Well, I think there's always an important question to ask, which is the so what of broadband.
Yes.
Like, all right, it's great to have.
But it was cool 20 years ago when you could download songs.
It was fabulous. But in fact, there is. It's important that you're connected to that community so you can actually demonstrate that bigger value, right? If it's just about streaming videos or playing video games from your treehouse, that is not going to be.
It's not the winning message.
So my kids were very into that.
But what I think the data shows, and this was the exciting part, is that it wasn't just high-speed internet. It was smaller ISPs where you saw that economic development action happening. Mm-hmm. And I think it's when you're of that community, when you're connected to them, when you're not distracted by your big urban customer base where you're actually going to dump all your money if you're a big national corporation, you're going to dive deep. You're going to figure out what are those problems. You're going to understand the product market fit at a much more granular level. And then hopefully you're also going to think big and aspirational with your community. And that's what we saw from the examples today on the main stage of those ISPs that are making those steps. That's what we saw in the research with Paul Bunyan up in Bemidji, Minnesota, as well as the folks in Statesboro, Georgia. I mean, it's really exciting to see what happens when you do that deep dive and you can actually commit to being able to leverage it and bring the whole community into that process.
So, man, just in the couple of minutes we have left here, let's talk about maybe aha moments that were non-intuitive. Very often when you do research reports like this, and you're both smart folks. Yeah, I didn't need a data report to tell me this, but there's always something that emerges out of the data that says, you know what, that is not intuitive. In fact, it may be even counterintuitive. Any specifically you'd like to call out?
I think the biggest aha moment for me was what Matt was getting at with these small broadband service providers. When we look at the history of, for example, co-ops, that they came to provide electricity to rural America when others wouldn't.
Yes.
And from that, we saw the economic impact. We saw manufacturing go to rural after that happened. And we saw kind of a similar story here where those co-ops were very much invested in their local community and willing to make an upfront investment in fiber, in the gigazone that is in Bemidji, Minnesota, in these value-added services. It was this community mindset that was especially prevalent in these co-ops and in these small broadband service providers that brought the additional service that allowed the community to really leverage broadband and have an outsized impact on their community.
Right. Any closing thoughts, Scott? Matt. I'm confusing you with Scott.
I'm flattered. No, I mean, it's super exciting to see a company like Calix be on this forward foot, to have a company that's aligned with the success of their customers, because they're also thinking about how they can make an impact. And we were just delighted when they reached out and said, you know what, we've all had a hunch that building high quality broadband and getting the community engaged would make a difference. We would like to see if the data actually backs that up. They had no interest in telling us what data we were supposed to have, or they gave Amanda free rein. And it was just so exciting to have that opportunity and then to come up with the results that we saw, which really shows proof positive that it makes a difference.
That's refreshing, because you see a lot of these research reports that come out that certain companies sponsor, and I know firsthand that that company will engage with that research company in a very aggressive manner, and they almost want to will the data to support whatever their strategy is. But it sounds like Calix took a very hands-off approach.
No,
What-
they let me
wasn't-
run with the data. We have a great data team that let me just throw that data out and see what came out. And it came out, and you can see it in the visualizations, and you can see it in the data. And then you can see it also in the case studies of what this really looks like for a real community and a broadband service provider providing these kind of services to their community.
Well, that's great. Well, guys, thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of the show. And again, from Smart Tech Research, this is Mark Vina.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Hi, this is Mark Vina with Smart Tech Research. Yet another great podcast interview about to begin here with Darren Mason with North Power Fiber. You're the CEO.
Correct.
I understand.
Yes.
Let's talk a little bit about right off the bat. We're kind of getting into the pre-drinks of
Not quite.
hours.
Not quite yet.
Well, yeah, listen, it's always 5 o'clock someplace. But let's talk about your organization, your relationship with Calix. I overheard that this is your fifth
Yeah, about my fifth time, I think, from
fifth
Calix.
time here.
Yeah.
Actually, I think this is number 6 for me, but who's counting?
Yeah.
And the keynotes were very interesting this morning. To me, that's the most provocative part of attending Calix. But let's, first of all, before we get into the meat of some of the things you're hearing from a theme standpoint and your relationship with Calix, let's talk about your company and the markets you serve.
Yeah. So, as you said, Darren Mason, so CEO of North Power Fiber. So we're a New Zealand-based open access for broadband fiber to the home company. So we're wholesale, so very similar to City Fiber versus Verizon, which is a vertical model. So we've got 25,000 customers currently connected to our network. We're over $100 million in assets that we've built. We started in 2011. We built the first sort of city by 2014. And then we've built more rural towns around the north part of New Zealand over the last sort of 6-7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we've taken fiber to the home into rural communities down to about 150 homes. We have 74% uptake, so that's a really strong model. We've got about 30 different retailers selling broadband services across our network.
Mm-hmm.
In New Zealand, there's sort of 3 big tier 1 retailers, but a lot's happening with bundling, a lot's happening with mobile, a lot's happening with content and television. And yeah, fiber's really become an essential service. Regulated as a one of 4 monopolies within the New Zealand market. And that has really exploded competition, services, pricing, opportunities for customers. And I think one of the biggest things around what we've been able to deliver to the communities is around, small rural communities can have the best service, the best connectivity of any major metropolis. Like the middle of New York, you can get that in the middle of New Zealand if you're a small rural town, which means you can compete.
Right.
You can do your financial services, you can do your health services, you can do your education services, and all of a sudden you're connected to the world. So we were the first city in New Zealand to be completely built out, and that made a fundamental difference to the people where we are.
So, Darren, when you hear that theme, it's not a new theme. Michael Weeding and Matt talk about this over and over again, but I think they do a really nice job of framing it. That BSPs, companies like yourself, regardless of where they are, whether in the United States or New Zealand, outside the U.S., you can't really focus on speed as your only value proposition. He was politically correct. He used the phrase death march. I would have used baton death march because I'm kind of a history buff. But do you align with that? And that, hey, listen, you really do, because at the end of the day, your company is interested in creating strategic and long-term relationships with BSPs. And if broadband turns into just a commodity, at the end of the day, that ability to capture extra margin, capture extra ARPU, that kind of goes out the window. So how do you react to that type of messaging? How do you kind of align with some of the things you heard about today?
Yeah, I think that conversation we're having is what we've seen. We've been in the game for a little while now, and the fundamental difference is this is about changing people's lives. This is about getting connectivity. This is getting people access to the best technology. Absolutely agree. Broadband's a commodity product. It's an essential commodity product. So you can't, if you have a power cut these days, you're more worried about your internet going down and what your kids are going to do than you are worried about trying to cook tonight, right?
Yeah.
You've got a barbecue so you can have your dinner. But
Right.
if you haven't got your internet, the kids don't know what to do. You can't access your financial services. You can't do your entertainment. So for us, it's about inequality. Everybody should have access. It should be a commodity. It's like water. You should have that. So our job is to make sure that that is delivered to 100% of the population, right? And then we need to make it affordable. It isn't about speed. Our sort of 70% of all of our customers are on what we call probably an entry level product, which is about a 300 meg product. And that is perfectly fine for everybody, but that's affordable. And we do have obviously probably a lower base product. That's just to make sure that community housing and those that can't afford it can actually get that.
Right.
The kids, some of the homes, some of the community housing, some of those particular areas where you've actually make sure you've got the Mirais and all that in New Zealand, which is a big part of the hub.
Right.
So it's about always on, always available, always being able to be connected, very high reliability. And when we change the technology, it needs to be seamless. And to move between one retailer and another retailer needs to be instantaneously. There needs to be no barriers to that. There's no held captive by one particular retailer. There's always something, and there's a uniqueness about that as well. So for us, it was about fundamentally changing the communities. You might have heard small regional towns, they become ghost towns. Everyone has to migrate to the cities because of a lack of infrastructure. Now you can thrive in those rural communities and you can have the best of those services.
Right.
So all of a sudden you can compete. You're not hamstrung by living where you want to live. And the cities can't necessarily keep all these people in the meter.
Well, and when you look at some of these value-added services that you working with Calix provide, whether it's really best-in-class security, they've got relationships with companies like Bark, which is great for parental controls. That's a fabulous solution, by the way. Now Calix is they're not just branching; they're reinforcing their strength in the smart biz, smart towns area, the MDU market for apartments. The reality is that a lot of the organizations like you are small companies. I mean, how many employees do you have?
So our particular company, we've got about nearly 1,600 employees.
That's relatively large in a Calix scheme, but there are many BSPs that Calix has that has 40, 50 employees. They're relatively small, but this whole notion that a homeowner or someone who's renting a property, they don't want to become the CIO, of or the CTO of their home. They want to have a relationship from an app standpoint, from an ease of use standpoint, to take advantage of all these great things that that broadband provides. So, are you seeing that, from your perspective, that most people don't want to become? I want to become the technical guru and manage my home. I really need to partner with someone who can provide me with the tools and capabilities and make it much easier to enjoy my whether it's 350 meg or whether it's a gig, if you step up and get much higher speed. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think we have a responsibility to make life easy. Right? Keep people safe, keep people connected, take their problems away from them. So obviously with the wholesale market, which is a bit difficult than the vertical market, we've got to work with lots of partners, 20, 30 different partners, and they're all quite unique, and they'll bring the best of security, they'll bring the best of the MDU stuff with them, and they'll actually develop the products and services that the customers want. So I think that's a fundamental. It's almost like your bread and butter. You need to make sure this stuff is done well.
Right.
Always on, always secure, always available, high speed. Your latency needs to be really great. Because I think we find that with some of the wireless and even the LEOs type stuff, right? You've got latency issues, you've got capacity constraints, and you can be a victim of your own success.
Right.
Where we've got an unconstrained network that will always be available and will always be future-proofed and will always be ahead. And I think what we're seeing even in the US here at the moment with all the BEAD programs, it's around extending that network because it's the best technology, future-proofed, sustainable, environmentally, works well. And I think that's where you see these networks running for the next 40 or 50 years.
In the couple of minutes we have left here, talk a little bit about your relationship with Calix.
So we've been a partner with Calix pretty much since we started. Actually, we were originally with Ericsson. Calix bought out Ericsson. a few years after we developed the layer 2 model, which is the smarts. And Calix has been right through us. We've been probably through 4 different ONTs. We've been through a few sets of upgrades. And what we've always enjoyed with Calix is Calix has been a challenger brand like we were. You know, they had come on board originally in the US and they were a challenger brand. They were innovative. They were actually listening to customers and they were trying to actually build them products that they could use. Fast to market, but reliable, always on, always resilient. So that's been a really tremendous sort of partnership, which we've probably now spanning probably close to 12 years. And they've always been able to deliver, and they've always been able to make our network work. And New Zealand's got a few strange aspects around voice and all this kind of stuff, but they've always been there. They've always been supportive of us right to the very top with Michael Wanning as well. Came to New Zealand, visited to us. You know, we feel like they're a trusted partner. You know, and that's why we're continuing with them today. That's why we've made the 20-hour flight here to ConneXions because of that partnership matters.
Well, that's amazing to hear because, you know, Calix does have an amazing, in my world where I speak to a lot of different companies, you know, every company talks about their partners and their strategic. But in the case of Calix, and this is not just lip service, they really mean it. In this event, it's all about partnerships, you know, and there's a humility that I find very refreshing that you don't really see at a lot of companies. So I do appreciate your time, Darren. Appreciate you stopping by and sharing some of your thoughts, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks very much, Mark. It's been great. And yeah, really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Darren. With Smart Tech Research, I'm here with Greg Mesh, the CEO and founder of City Fiber. And this is going to be yet another great short interview, just about 10 minutes long, to discuss Greg's company, the markets they serve. I believe you're the one BSP we've spoken to. This is your first attendance.
It's my first attendance, and I think we're the only real. No, there's some other European companies. But.
Yes, but probably the most important one. I'll say that. I'll say that right on camera. So let's talk about. You did attend the keynotes earlier.
I certainly did.
Any initial
they're
impressions?
fabulous.
What did you think?
Oh, the energy level was really high. The leadership from every speaker was really, really good. That polls you. Overall impression, it was really excellent stuff. I wasn't expecting it so good, to be really honest.
Yeah, they do incredibly professional jobs. I mean, I do a lot of these kind of events, and you know, you hear a lot about how companies, we have lots of partners here. You know, they use partnership in a very
No, I think Michael Weening really means.
No, he really means it. No, I don't say that.
And by the way, that's what comes through with everybody that was up there is they mean that. And
yes, there's a genuine. I
can tell you as a fellow CEO, there's a lot of times where you meet and they don't really mean it.
No, I think you're spot on. I think you're spot on. And you know, one of the interesting themes, and I want to get your reaction to this, and it's not a new theme for Calix, is they keep talking to their BSP community saying, hey, listen, you cannot focus your entire value proposition on speed. And that's not to say that speed is not important. With some data that was shown up saying it, you know, that while the 1 gigabyte space and faster is growing, if you focus entirely on that, and he was politically correct. I would have used the phrase, Bataan Death March. He just said Death March, but it's a really compelling. It's really a compelling idea that hey, you have to have a value proposition that's built on services. You have to have a value proposition that creates this incredibly immersive experience and allow customers to take advantage of that. So, what was your reaction to that theme in particular?
Well, I've known Michael a long time. He's been out to see us at City Fiber in London and in Britain for quite a while, and we've always been debating that issue and how much that is. But City Fiber is a bit different because we're not a retailer at all. So we're 100% wholesale, and we use Calix in the access network, and they've been really wonderful because we do a lot of different things at the wholesale level. It's not necessarily like open access in the fiber world. It's a more of a wholesale offering with active layers across business, public sector, even mobile. We have 2,500 mobile sites on.
Right.
So when we've debated the home side of things, we have big service providers that use us, and they're the retailers. And we often make it very simple. Nobody is going to buy from us because it's faster speed or it's cheaper if it doesn't run. So it's all about service for us.
Right.
And I think that's what Michael's saying is it's really about the service.
Yes.
So we think of service as it's up 99.99% of the time. It's installed within 5 days. The early life failures are 0.002%. The mean time repair is 72.3 hours. Those are the things that are meaningful to us because our customers crave a really strong, reliable service, which is what Michael's saying is it's about the service you give and all the different components of that service, whether it's managing Wi-Fi, whether it's managing content, whether it's managing traffic. It's the service you're giving that people will pay for, not just that you have a high speed.
Right. And what's true, and I'm sure it's true in the European market as well, is that many of the BSPs that partner with Calix in the U.S., they're not large Comcast like BSPs.
Of course not. They're
And they're very
Small.
relatively small. Some are larger than others.
small service
But
providers.
but they're all about creating a long-term, very sticky relationship. They're not interested in a subscriber that's going to subscribe for 6 months and then fly the coop and partner with somebody else.
Well, you have to accommodate them also, but yes.
Yeah. So let's also talk about some of the, they made some additional announcements today, but in terms of Calix's focus on things like outside of just pure, um, the consumer or the homeowner itself, they're partnering right now. They're providing solutions and capabilities in the multi-dwelling unit market.
MDUs. Yep.
MDU, smart business becoming a big deal. Smart towns, which is kind of a relatively, it's been around for a couple of years, but it's kind of a relatively new concept. How does that kind of jive with your strategy?
Well, there's a lot of overlay, a lot of common ground in all of that. But again, we're not a service provider,
Yes.
a retail layer. But we build full city networks. So unlike some that just build homes or maybe just build business networks or even public sector, when we come in and cover a city or an area, we're designing it based on our reference design, which we call it a well-planned city design, but it accommodates enough for municipalities, public sector, schools, Wi-Fi hotspots, zones all throughout the community, social housing. All of those are designed in because we ultimately think you're going to connect every building. And then we also design it for mobile base stations and cell sites and macro sites. And then we design it for where all the businesses and the business parks. And then we also design it for where the homes are. So when you have a rollout that dense, what we can do is a lot of the MDU stuff that you're talking about. We build out every single MDU, make sure that there's fiber into the basement so that a service provider, like one of Calix's customers here, could come in, plug in on top of our fiber network,
Right.
and they could light up the whole MDU.
Yes.
Right? Those things are fantastic, and Calix enables all that because of their solid control at that access layer.
Yes.
So it really works good. But in our case, as a wholesaler, we're more about enabling the fiber throughout the entire city, town, and zone, or wherever we are, and then that allows the service providers to use our network.
And those service providers can charge higher prices for them.
For sure, they can charge for their services, and that is the point that Michael's making: is that people pay for good service. You know, we all say we go buy the cheap stuff, but if there's something that's a little better on
Right.
the shelf, we'll usually tend to buy that
That's
one
exactly
that's
right.
a little better.
That's exactly right.
And even though we're in there saying I'm not going to spend more than $7.99, sometimes I do the $9.90 wide because I think it's a little better.
That's exactly right.
So we all inherently seek out better, and offering better and better and better services will be noticeable by the user, by the consumer, by the end user, and that creates the relationship with you and your customer. And Calix is really good at that.
This has been great, and I don't want to hold you up from ultimately getting to the festivities here later tonight. Can't wait to see Jerry D. That should be fun.
that should be
He's
good.
such an entertaining guy.
That should be big.
Any remaining closing remarks you'd like to make?
No, I think the world is in another digital revolution. It's if most people think about this in context of the AI, but if you think that just 20 years ago, there wasn't an iPhone. I think it came out in about
2007.
2007. So go back 20 years, there was no iPhone. And we were just getting broadband into everybody's homes, right?
Yes.
It was still dial up back then in a lot of
I
cases, or
remember-
ADSL, or
I remember the day.
okay.
that-
So in
Yeah.
20 years, we've almost wired up
yes,
a huge population, and we just need to continue that. And there's only one technology to use, which is
fiber.
because it's cheaper, it's better green, it's better than the environment. So my theory is the faster we put fiber into every single building on the planet Earth, the better we'll be, because it will allow free flow of communications
Yes.
at the speed of light. That will enable all of the other things we need, which is the AI systems, the mass virtual reality, the next wave of social media, good or bad, that's coming, the news flow for everybody, so that we can actually get whatever news flow we want from wherever. So I think the enabling infrastructure is fiber across this world and in every building in town. And Calix is just in a super sweet spot because
Yes.
they control that access layer so well, and they do so many unique things that they're getting embedded in the value added chain.
And I can't agree more. I mean, to me, it's akin to the experience when you went from dial-up to broadband in those days.
For sure.
It was, I was mesmerized. You could download a song from Kazaza, if you remember those.
I do.
You could go from, it took me 6 minutes to download a Frank Sinatra song. Now I can do it in 80 seconds.
Correct.
And interestingly, I just moved from San Jose out to Vegas after 18 years. And believe it or not, the Bay Area has really, you don't have many choices for broadband, and there's not much fiber, believe it or not. I moved out here about 3 months ago, and one of the BSPs out here that I've done some work with, now I have a fiber connection, and even I can see the value when you go from fiber from a coax connection. It really is amazing.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah,
amazing.
upload and downloads is symmetrical. The
yeah.
service quality is uniform. It's not got buffering and jitter and all those things that we don't know. That's what makes it a high quality internet.
It's a digital connection.
High quality, high
yeah.
quality digital connection is what you're seeking, and you're never going to get that on a copper or coaxial
No, you're
network.
not.
It's
You're
going to be
not.
jittery and bouncy and up and down, and if the wind blows one day and the rain comes the next,
Well,
it
and the
all
latency
goes
went
out.
down dramatically.
So anyway, yeah,
no, it's good.
we're in violent agreement on that.
Fiber is the future. But thanks again, Greg. Appreciate your
welcome.
time. Thank you again.
Bye bye.